So what about did it take you a long time to get into Woodstock? Because
well, yeah, because
like were you scheduled to play like on Thursday and then it turned out to be Monday?
No, we were supposed to play Saturday night at 8 p.m. We ended up going on at 3 a.m. but we were there, and that was because Michael Lang, you know, promoters and producers kept coming back saying everything's behind. We got to wait another hour. This went on all night till 3 a.m.
That's a lot of.
And your performance is legendary.
Which was a challenge because you got to figure all those people were there from Thursday, and they're there, 24 hours a day. Sun, it's raining, it's hot, and they're tired. They're done with. It's a Saturday night. They're done, and we're looking at each other. 3 a.m. We got to go on. It was raining all night, and people are like, huddled up in their tents and they're asleep and. Who cares, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, remember we looked at each other and just kind of said, well, all we could do is take the stage and just give it all we got, And so that's what we did.
Mickey, we talked earlier this morning about music and the British invasion, but I want to know what Monkey Mania was like. When you were out in a concert or you're out in public and the fans are crazed, what is that experience like?
Well, I guess it's the same experience that we've all had when you're at that certain little peak. You get those little mountains and valleys. But I first want to also start out by saying I haven't met or know everybody here individually and very well, but I'm so flattered and honored to be on the same stage of all these incredible musicians. You don't keep doing this for this many years without having the goods. My mom just loved you guys. She bought me all your albums, and I love them to this day. Well, the mania, it happens. It does. In my case, it didn't happen so much in your hometown, in my hometown. I don't know if everybody else can agree, but in your own town, after you've been in the business for a decade, as I had been already, you become a little bit like furniture, and so people just expect seeing you at the dry cleaners, and they why. But boy, when we hit the road in '67, the 50th is coming up. It was an eye opener. I mean, because we had just been. In the studio, filming the television show, of course, for 10 hours a day at least, 10 to 12 hours a day, just filming, and nobody around. There's no social media. No one knows where you are. You just get in your car and you drive home, and then on the weekends, starting to rehearse for the touring, and then at night after the show, I mostly, because I did most of the leads, I would be in the studio at RCA Victor sometimes doing 2 or 3 lead vocals a night. And I listen back to some of that shit, and I'm like, oh, yeah. I wish I'd have had another shot at that one. But that's what we had to do. We had to fulfill this, crazy commitment. So it wasn't until we hit the road that actually it was slightly before that. It was December. And I've told this story, probably a lot of people here have heard it. It was December of '66, so the show had been on for 3 months from September. Like at least 1 or 2 of the records were top 10. But again, we were almost incommunicado. I mean, we were in studio, car, studio, cafeteria, recording studio, and back home. And we got a hiatus. We got 1 week off of the show. And I was going to drive up north to see my family who were living in San Jose. So I got in my little car, my shopping list, and I went down to the local mall that I'd shopped at my whole life. I grew up in the Valley, and I was 2 blocks from where I grew up. And I went down to this mall, and I've got my list, and I've got to go get my stuff. And I go through the big glass doors, and all of a sudden I hear people screaming and running at me. I thought it was a fire. And I'm holding open the door going, don't panic. Slow down, walk it. Okay, don't panic. And I suddenly realized they were running at me. And I was really pissed off because I had to leave. I had to get back in my car, and I went and got my one of my roadies to buy all my Christmas presents.
Wow.
That was the first inkling that I had, and it can get crazy, and sometimes it can get dangerous. You know, I suspect everybody here has some story about something that could have or might have gotten out of hand.
All right, I want to talk to the guys from Vanilla Fudge because they've got new music coming out, but the CD that came out last year is perfect for this cruise because it is called the Spirit of 67, and it has 10 cover songs on it, including I'm a Believer, which is a very cool version of that song. For what it's worth, heard it through the grapevine. So if you get a chance, if the CDs are available on the cruise, definitely worth the listen. And Mark wrote the final track on it. So there's a lot of great music. But I wanted to ask you guys, you were huge Beatle fans because you included a couple of songs on an early album, right? So can you give us that? Did you get into music because of the state of pop music at the time, Mark?
Well, actually, all of us started out so young in life, you know, learning on our instruments, and we progressed through the streets singing, you know, a cappella with great harmonies. And then when we started checking out the clubs in New York, we were checking out all the top 40 bands, and finally, when we hit Long Island, there was a Long Island sound where bands were doing like long production numbers. There was a band called The Vagrants, the first time I ever saw a band take a song like Exodus, if I Was a Carpenter, and they made this big arrangement production number out of it, and it totally changed my life and blew my mind, okay? But before that, we saw a band called the Young Rascals.
Yeah. We had Felix here last year. He'll be back next year on the cruise.
And that was the first blue-eyed soul band. I must have been 19 years old. We used to go every night at the phone booth in New York City, which was a discotheque in those days. So I'd sit under Felix Cavallari's Hammond organ, this beast of an instrument, and that's what just blew me away, and his soulful singing got me personally into playing Hammond and singing like that, you know. So it was really the combination of the blue-eyed soul of the Rascals and the arrangement capabilities of the Vagrants, which was the nucleus for Vanilla Fudge ultimately. So, you know, so yeah.
Also, funny enough.
Sounds good. Perfect.
Dive.
I was going to say, it is a combination of what Mark said, but also we did listen to like the Yardbirds in those days, and they were doing the rave-up stuff. And the rave-up stuff really became the psychedelic part of our stuff, you know. And when we did listen to songs, we tried to match the music to the lyrics. You know, if you look at You Keep Me Hanging On, the lyrics are hurting, so they slowed it down, made it drama. Eleanor Rigby's like a very eerie kind of approach. People Get Ready, gospel approach with organ and gospel voices. So that's what we always tried to do, you know.
Did you, what was the reason that you decided to remake You Keep Me Hanging On, Motown song, Supremes?
Well, I mean, Mark can tell you that story. Yeah.
Well, it was I think it was the winter of 1966, and we were parked in front of another discotheque called the Cheetah on Broadway, and it was freezing cold out. So actually, I was sitting in Tim Bogert, our original bass player's 55 Chevy, and the Supreme come on, you know, You Keep Me Hanging On, real fast. We were smoking a little doobie, you know. It was.
Really?
But I mean, the stuff back then was so mild compared to now. I mean. How do I know? Because you turned me on to the latest stuff. That's why.
You know, did you get
honestly,
I was gonna say, did you get on in Jamaica?
I was looking at Tim, and you know, we were already into that, you know, that symphonic psychedelic arrangement mode, and I said, "Wow, this tune would be amazing. Slow down." And he looked at me and he says, "Go to work," you know. So I came up with this concept, you know, with this thematic kind of thing. Vinny had this incredible, you know, introduction raga lick. And Carmine and Tim, we were playing at a place called Ongano's, which was another discotheque uptown on the west side of New York. And we just started putting all the pieces together, and we knew we had something special. It just came together. And we started playing it, and the club owners used to throw us out because they couldn't dance to our music, right? And we just stuck to our guns, and before you knew it, they started sitting down and just checking us out like a show band. And that's kind of like one of the beginnings of the Vanilla Fudge, those thematic things. So
Talk about Led Zeppelin, because they opened for you guys, like the first 50 shows or for first couple of years. Tell me about Led Zeppelin being your opening act.
Led Zeppelin opened for us. We had great management, great people behind the scenes supporting us. And they came over. We were label mates, yes. And Zepp came over, and they wanted to get on a tour. And our people set it up to let them get on the tour and open up for us. And that's how we got started. We went up to, me and Mark went up to the hotel. Robert Plant came over here with a suitcase full of records. Remember that? Yeah. We went up to the hotel. They were in awe of us. It was like, a wonderful thing. But, at that time, we were looking to take a little break, which we did in 70, and they started taking off, and all the business people got behind them, and they took off, as they should have, and soared to be the biggest band in the world, if I may say, for a while. And still, even today, right? By the way, right? Isn't that cool? Hey, dig it. If anybody isn't hip to it, we're passing Cuba. All right?
Anybody want to get off?
This mic. Oh, there we go. And a little something for you, Mickey. When you said the crowds ran towards you, remember? Okay, that happened to me in Japan in 1991. We went over to Japan to play Tokyo. And the last day of the tour, I came out of the hotel. I went up to one of these shrines that they had across from the hotel. And I came out of the hotel, and there's all these people waiting on lines. I figured, geez, what's going on here? So I'm walking down the street. Next thing I turn around, they're all running towards me. And I thought, what's going on? The same thing like you. And sure enough, they were coming after me to sign autographs, all right? So anyway, that's where that's at. Yeah, rock and roll, people.
My name is Henry Smith, and I've been with the Yardbirds since '66. Not as a musician. I couldn't carry a tune in a bucket. But I was with Led Zeppelin when we played with these guys. I went from the Yardbirds to Zeppelin. And there was a show that we did with this group when I was with Jeff Beck in Singer Bowl on Long Island. And at that time, Jeff had Rod Stewart, Tony Newman, Ronnie Wood, and Jeff. Yeah, but I don't think Mickey was with us on that show. But the point of the story is that the guys from Zeppelin showed up because Jeff was playing and these guys were playing. And everybody got pretty wasted on drink. At the end of the show, we were doing Jailhouse Rock. And the band's out there playing away, having a great time. Well, Bonzo comes out and I think takes your kit, which was center stage, and he's playing away. Well, I'm standing there, and Steve Weiss, who I think was your manager at the time, was your lawyer, Steve Weiss, and he was also...
Wow, really?
And he was also the lawyer for Zeppelin. Everybody that came into New York, at Hendrix, just about everybody in those days. Well, Bonzo's sitting there, and he's taking his shirt off, and I'm going, oh, Jesus. A couple of minutes later, the shoes are off. Then the pants come off. And they've got guys out there with spotlights, and they're shining on him, and Steve Weiss is yelling at me, get him off the stage. And he wasn't an easy guy to move around. So I've got Bonzo like in a full Nelson, and I'm dragging him off the stage. Meanwhile, there's a few policemen over here like this, and Peter Grant is digging in his pocket like this, and that was it.
Okay. So the end of that story is my mother and father were at that show. Okay? So my mother comes up after the show and says, why did he take his clothes off? I said, I don't know. But, I have an autobiography out that has that story in it, And it was quite an amazing thing. And back in those days, I helped John Bonzo get his Ludwig endorsement. And I remember calling up Ludwig saying, I think these guys are going to be big. And now I say it's an understatement of 5 decades, right? I say huge, as we all know. But,
right.
Yeah, but it was a great tour. We had a good time with them. We all became good friends. One other quick thing. I remember we were walking down Santa Monica Boulevard, and I was telling Robert Plant he should move around more.
I told Paige to get bigger amps.
Pete, anything?
No, I wasn't there.
You know, we really could have used the chair. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, okay.
I'm just
Good
kidding.
one.
Just kidding. Just kidding. Let's talk to the Yardbirds because you guys, unbelievable band, legendary supergroup, and we're so honored to have you on the Flower Power Cruise. Jim, because you came in the British invasion, and we had that chat earlier with Mickey and with Mr. Asher. Talk to us about the music scene. What were you hearing from the rock and roll in America back in '63? Probably the Elvis and that lot.
Well, originally it was the rock and roll, yeah. You know, Elvis and the Crickets and Buddy Holly and the Everly Brothers.
So was everybody in England really affected by Elvis and Buddy Holly? And it seems like a lot of the same.
Yeah, it was big.
All the big artists.
Big. But everything changed about 1963 when we heard R&B. You know, that was R&B was like Jimmy Reed, Howling Wolf, Chuck Berry, and all that stuff. And that was like a whole new thing altogether. And the Beatles were sort of doing that, but I think, you know, the Yardbirds and the Stones and, you know, the Kinks and Pretty Things, we were all from the South, you know, the Beatles from the North, Liverpool, and we were all from London. And we sort of, we based our repertoire on about 6 albums. You know, a Howling Wolf album, Chuck Berry one.
And you were all covers, basically.
Yeah, and they were all
right?
covers.
Yeah,
we didn't do our own songs.
Right. So, but because you were in London, it was a pretty cosmopolitan area with all the theater and shops and Broadway, and not Broadway, but I mean theater and music. Did you feel like you were already in a big enough place, or were you interested in coming to America?
Oh, it was a dream for us.
Yeah.
It was for English kids, you know. America is what we saw in the movies. We saw westerns and we saw gangster movies, you know. It was a dream. We were living in sort of foggy old London, you know.
It's changed a little bit.
Yeah, it's changed.
Yeah.
It's changed a lot.
Yeah, well, you'll get to see it pretty
but
soon.
In those days, that was the dream. And, you know, to be part of that was fantastic.
So can anybody on the speak to what it was like when you first came to America and you looked up at all the buildings and you've really had your first...
Yeah. I mean, I remember sharing a hotel room with Jeff Beck.
Mm-hmm.
We were on the 30th floor in New York, and he was saying to me, God, look at all those cars, you know, all those fantastic cars, because he was a car freak. And then we got to Hollywood, and wow, you know, all the Beach Boys and all that stuff, you know.
So did you guys get into music because you loved music or you wanted to be a rock star? John Lennon always said, I went and saw Elvis and all the girls screamed when he came on the screen. And I said, that's a good job. So was that for you too?
No, I think it was just the excitement of that sort of music. We called it R&B, but it's sort of blues really, isn't it? And we just loved that sort of edge, that rawness to it, and that sort of fantastic feeling, you know.
Did you feel a competition with American bands? Did you feel like they're our competition, or we're all going to do great with this new music?
Well, they were all...
Oh,
I sat in the middle, so I didn't...
Here, we got a mic coming your way.
Oh. I watched both sides. I watched the English side because I lived in England when I was working with them and when I started with Zeppelin. And then over here you watch the other side, how American bands, to me at the time, it was like the Buffalo Springfield and Moby Grape and Zappa and bands like that were doing great here. Well, yeah, it was. It was basically a lot of West Coast bands. Right, mostly New York bands and bands like you guys and the Rascals and in England it was a whole different type of music scene.
But when we
going on.
started, it was just the blues. It was just black, you know.
Yeah, but we weren't doing that here because black music in the U.S. at that time was
nobody
kind
knew
of
that music.
underground.
That's the weird thing.
Yeah.
Nobody knew those songs, and we were playing them to American people, and they thought we were great, you know.
Well, we had
Your own
Pat
songs.
Boone covering the hits of Little Richard over here. So
Whole Lot of Love by Pat Boone.
yeah. So what's your favorite thing about the 60s and touring and rock and rolling? Is it seeing the crowd when you come out? Is it after the show? Is it meeting Mickey at the grocery store? What is and you can pass the mic down if you want. What do you guys like about the music performing today?
Well, besides for us as the newer members of the band, I've been in the group for playing with Jim since almost 30 years now, and it's been an honor to do so. But it's always been in that sort of following on from the original thing, and it's an honor to be able to do so. So, and also to keep that music alive for the generation that listened to it originally and for future generations to be able to appreciate it, because all this music had an intrinsic quality to it that you guys picked up on, reinterpreted it. And I think the other thing, if I can just make a point about all the musicians from this era, maybe by comparison to some of today's ideology, is that I don't think any of these guys actually went in their bedrooms and said, I'm going to be famous one day because I'm going to be famous one of these days because I'm playing this guitar chop or I'm learning this drum lick. I think it was more for the pure satisfaction that they could do it and that they were going to be good at it, you know?
Eric clap. Was there maybe
In harmony now. Eric, clap.
Was there any like rebellion, like my parents want me to go get a job in an office and I really want to do that? Was you, Jim? Or
Yeah, I was an only child. I lived just with my mum because my father died. And my mum didn't want me to give up my job because that was I worked to stockbrokers in the London Stock Exchange, you know. And but I was working every night with the band, and it was really difficult. I was going straight from the city out to the gig and sort of changing, you know, going in the lavatory and changing something into my playing gear. And that was hard work. And eventually I had to convince my mum, and it was really difficult. And it was, as soon as I was on the TV, it was different. Oh then you're on the TV. Right. Oh, I'll tell the neighbors.
That's great. Let's talk to you guys. First of all, I want to mention that the Yardbirds inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1992. So deserving. So amazing. What's it like for you guys on stage? We haven't heard from you guys and rolling around. That one?
Well, I'm a slightly bit younger than Jim. I'm maybe the next generation coming up. But one of the main reasons I really play guitar the way I do was responsible because of the Yardbirds 65, 66 era. So, you know, growing up and being really influenced by the British invasion and the Beatles and the Yardbirds and the Kinks and the Who and Stones and all that stuff, for me to be able to sit in that same chair with, you know, my heroes as guitar players coming up like Jeff Beck and Eric Clapton and Jimmy Page, and to be able to sit in that chair and play those songs with a great band and with the original person with that spirit is a big honor for me. It's pretty heavy load, so it's something special. Wouldn't you say, Kenny?
Absolutely. I grew up in Brooklyn, and I had an older brother who was a musician, so.
Brooklyn.
Brooklyn. Hey.
Brooklyn, yeah.
Hey.
I'll go with that one.
But I had an older brother who was a musician, so there was music in my house all the time. So I grew up with Elvis and doo-wop, But when the English invasion came, it was all over for me. It was Stones, Beatles, and Yardbirds. And I played Yardbirds records constantly. And arguably, it's the reason why I play bass, because of Paul Samuel Smith, the original bassist. And I have this picture that I posted on Facebook a while back. I'm about 14 years old. I'm in my bedroom in my parents' house, and I'm standing in front of the record player. And in front of me, just above me, is a shelf full of records, and the record on the end is Having a Rave Up. And I'm looking at it. And it's a 50-year dream come true to be in this band and be playing this music.
Well, how did you get in?
And also, I'm sitting on the stage with heroes of mine, because I saw these two gentlemen in 1968, second on the bill to Jimi Hendrix at the Fillmore East. And the Fudge, these guys were heroes of mine.
Yeah.
So it's a real honor to be here.
Well, all of you are special to us, and we all agree. Well, that being the case, tell me how you got invited to be in the Yardbirds.
A friend of mine from New York, who we email each other about musical stuff, sent me something about something, whatever it was, and says, by the way, I think the Yardbirds might be looking for a new bassist. Why don't you get in touch with Jim on Facebook? And so I Facebook him, and I said, I'm Kenny Aaronson, and I won't bore you with the details. Google me if you want to know what I've done. Because I've been a sideman for 45 years and played with just amazing musicians. And just told him that I was a Yardbirds fanatic since I was 13, 14 years old. And I knew all the material. And if he was looking for somebody, I'm around. And he got back in touch with me like 3 days later. And he just said, you got the job. This is the easiest gig I ever got. Really.
That's pretty good.
So,
well, you know,
well, the funny thing about this band is when we all got the call to do the gig, none of us auditioned for the gig. We just showed up at a rehearsal. I got a call from Jim, and Mike was there, and Kenny was there, and John was there, and we had a list of songs, and we played them, and that was it.
Were they Yardbirds tunes, or were they covered?
They were Yardbirds tunes. No, they were Yardbirds tunes, but it was just odd because there was not really an audition process. We just kind of had the gig.